Jessica and Jonathan. Welcome to the broadcast.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Nasser, to begin with, let me come to you first. The much anticipated in-person talks between US President Joe Biden and China's President Xi Jinping during the APEC Summit. What would you say will be the key areas of discussions? What should we be looking out for?
Jonathan, are we audible to you?
You're audible, but I can't hear what's happening with the programming, unfortunately.
All right. Okay. If I'm audible now, I'll repeat. We essentially just want to get your thoughts on the much anticipated talks and meeting between Xi Jinping and Joe Biden. What do you expect comes out of this?
Look, this is a big deal that the two world leaders have not met in quite some time. Tensions are extremely high. This comes after we're still feeling the happy glow from the meeting between Biden and Modi, President Modi, when he had a state visit in the United States. And to be perfectly honest, there's a long road to go until until China and the United States find some sort of accommodation for one another. Things are quite tense indeed. And China has played a very unhelpful role in terms of dealing with the raging conflicts going on in the world, Russia, Ukraine, and also the current ongoing crisis in the Middle East.
Right. Jessica, coming to you now. You're, of course, in San Francisco. Tell us what's the mood on ground. What can you tell us of the preparations? What's scheduled in the coming days? And what will be the key topics of discussions?
Well, a lot to unpack there. I want to give you a bit of color, which I think is really fascinating. The backdrop of where President Xi and President Biden will be meeting tomorrow is not inside the city of San Francisco. It is, in fact, at a historic mansion about an hour's drive outside of San Francisco called the Filoli Estate. And the Filoli Estate has beautiful gardens and orchards, and it's also home to the San Andreas Fault. This is significant because this is literally where the Pacific tectonic plate and the North American tectonic plate meet. It can create earthquakes and volcano eruptions when it rubs against each other, or it can create nothing but calm. And that is very, very instrumental in underscoring the kind of relationship and the potential of the US-China relationship. It's a significant backdrop for these two leaders. They are scheduled to have a 4-hour meeting on Wednesday that includes a working lunch, a walk and talk throughout the grounds, reminiscent of President Xi Jinping's meeting in Sunnylands with President Obama years ago. And it certainly is a photo op for both of them. And perhaps that's what Xi Jinping wants. It's also what Joe Biden wants. He wants to make sure that relations remain open, that communication remains open. And frankly, American officials have really kept expectations low. They are not signaling that there will be any major outcomes, any major announcements out of this. But in fact, they are coming into this looking for two things from China. Number one, they want them to use their influence in Iran to get Iran to stop backing Hamas and to also keep Hezbollah from getting involved in the Israel-Hamas war. And number two, they want a restoration of military-to-military communication. That is very important to the Americans. Why? Because in the earlier part of this year, when that Chinese spy balloon was hovering over the United States, they could not reach a Beijing official on the phone. There was no communication during that time, and it was a very threatening time, almost a Cold War era time in this country, where there were people around the country literally wondering if the Chinese were floating above them, looking at what they were doing. I mean, that's not an exaggeration of what people were feeling at the time. So that's what they're looking for coming out of this summit.
Jessica, stay with us. I'll just come back to you. Want to have a quick word with Jonathan again. Jonathan, Joe Biden would be eager to portray IPEF as producing meaningful outcomes and, to leaders of APEC countries. He seeks to offer them a US-led alternative to deeper economic ties to China. How do you see this one playing out? Now, of course, APEC is a forum for coming together, but this is seeming to be extremely competitive.
Yeah, indeed. APEC has had all sorts of problems, over the years, and as a group, a lot of pressures, a lot of different influences coming into play here. I thought Jessica did a good job of outlining expectations, and it is curious, of course, about the Andreas Fault that I had forgotten about. That's really quite funny. But the truth is, the world is undergoing all sorts of strange shifts There really is a symbolism to this meeting happening, and certainly expectations that there's going to be suddenly a change of events from this meeting, I think, would be foolish. China has, from the American perspective, played a very unhelpful role in every sort of way possible, both at the United Nations in terms of Security Council resolutions, all the way through with postures and alliances with Moscow, with Tehran, and this tripartite that really is perceived as a threat in terms of America's position in the world, certainly India's position in the world as well. So, there's also a concern about India in this perspective, though India is not part of APEC. Where does India fit in this? If there's a warming of relations with China, which I don't expect to happen overnight, that could be posed as something that would be almost viewed upon as being neglectful on the U.S.'s part. So it's a very thin line that the United States needs to walk on. Certainly, President Biden needs to show strength also at this summit. The United States' position is taking a lot of battering around the world for trying to support Israel in its efforts to crush Hamas, which has come at a huge toll for the Palestinian people living in Gaza as that fighting ensues. And there's an election that's around the corner, and President Biden trying to position himself as a world leader when he has a lot of chomping at his heels going on simultaneously. And of course, San Francisco itself is a city that has undergone a lot of difficulty over the years coming out of COVID, economic difficulties that most large American cities are going through. It is, arguably a smart decision to actually have this meeting take place outside of San Francisco itself, because San Francisco is not the crown jewel that has been celebrated in the past.
All right, Mr. Waschel, thank you so much for joining us on World DNA with your insights and your perspective on this.
Pleasure.
Jessica, coming right back to you, of course, the tensions and ongoing challenges between the US and China, of course, that is a major topic. It almost seems as if the APEC Summit is happening on the sidelines of the Biden-Xi Jinping meet. But I wanted to get your thoughts on this, particularly on trade, which is essentially the basis of the competition where it is all stemming from at the moment. How do you expect this to be addressed, or do you feel it will be exacerbated at the APEC Summit?
Well, look, India is a prime example of the benefits that come out of the U.S.-China trade tension. This is a delinking that is happening that is benefiting other parts of the world. And the U.S. is not only going to other partner nations who have better diplomatic relations and more friendly democratic ideals, but they are also offering incentives to U.S. businesses to create and place parts of the supply chain in these countries. For example, in Vietnam, we see that there's a new supply chain factory being built there that was just announced in the past month that's being incentivized by $500 million that are contained in the CHIPS Act, which is essentially a fund just to incentivize investment abroad that will strengthen U.S. supply chains, and in particular strengthen the semiconductor supply chain, because Americans, like the rest of the world, felt the pain of those slowdowns with respect to what they wanted to buy that had chips. And let's face it, everything has chips in it that you want to use nowadays, including what I'm coming to you live on right now. So we see India being a benefactor of that. We see Southeast Asia being a benefactor of that. And this is really a backdrop where you're going to see a lot of wheeling and dealing. I don't expect major announcements, but we're going to be talking to CEOs from Vietnam and Indonesia about deals they want to reach with the U.S. government around critical minerals, around mining, around supply chain resilience, and around semiconductor supply chain resilience. So don't forget that the business community is really very much invested in the U.S.-China relationship. It's not going to go away, but parts of the high-tech aspects that are now walled off thanks to U.S. export controls, they are going to move away from China. They are going to move towards more friendly countries where the U.S. can have a more open and transparent dialogue about the regulations, about the labor environment, and about the environmental regulations that surround those companies.
So it is definitely deemed to be as competitive as it is expected to be. But thank you so much for joining in, Jessica. Always a pleasure speaking with you.
Always good to be with you, Siobhan.
Yes, we will be speaking again over the next few days again, keeping up with all the updates that you get us from ground.